Well, that live was a little bit of a shambles. I do apologise. That's what happens when you have issues with the internet. You speak to another company and you say, I've got issues with my internet. It's not right. It's not good. And I need help. And they say, don't worry. We've got you covered. You can trust us. If someone says you can trust them and they are a business, do not trust them. Anyway, let's get straight into the meat and potatoes. So what are we talking about? This is the video that I was talking about at the beginning of the live when I said that this took me 30 minutes to make, and then I realised it was an absolute utter shambles. So, yes, I want to forget about yesterday because it wasn't a very good day. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to read it to you. I'm going to read this. So the link is in the description of this video, which will take you over to the angelic sounds of Southern Logic, and you can hear him say it in his accent because he's got a better accent than I have. But I'm going to go through it. I'm going to talk about it and let you know what I think about it. This has been heavily requested in my emails. Some people have already seen it and they wanted to know my take on it. But it's about a bit of a taboo subject. When we talk about the Idaho 4 case, there are certain things that we're not allowed to mention without people getting very upset. They'll turn around and they'll say things like,
"You can't say that. That's wrong. You're tragedy pimps. You're just making money off the back end of these poor victims."
While they're getting paid to make videos talking about these victims. Anyway, this was sent to Southern Logic, and it's one of these taboo subjects that we're not allowed to talk about. And we're going to talk about it. Here is my current theory on the Idaho murders based on what we know to this point. Of course, I could be wrong, but this theory seems to make all the pieces fit. It's important to note at this stage, when we're talking about the pieces fit, what pieces are they talking about? Because that's the important thing, isn't it? When you're saying that it makes the pieces fit, those pieces could be made up of utter shit. And if you're trying to make utter shit fit, then the story as a whole is likely to be utter shit. So I'll go on to say that much when we talk about this. So Quinn Kelly, Dylan's boyfriend, was trafficking drugs. And I'd like to point out at this stage, I'm not saying he was. This is something that is being said, not by me. I'm just telling you that someone else is saying it. Admitted by several who know him. And this is what I mean by other people are saying it. There's people online, on the internet, who are claiming to be friends with him or know him and are saying that this is what's going on. From Boise to Moscow and the University of Idaho campus, the murder house was the distribution point. Leaks indicate it was a massive drug house for Moscow. Now, I've not seen anything credible that has confirmed that. That's not something that's confirmed. The taxi driver at the beginning of the case who was in the area, obviously he was talking about this area being known for narcotics. And the only thing that kind of pushes you in the direction of 1122 King Road is because we know that they had parties there. It was a house where a lot of people would frequent. And it's fair to assume that in these places where there's a lot of students, there's money, there's fraternities, sororities, there is going to be narcotics. There is. It's just the way things are. And people can stick their head in the sand and say it's not happening, but it does. I did a video a few weeks back that talked about this specifically and showed cases where even the sorority girls had been involved in being drug trafficking rings themselves, and had been brought down by people who had set up meetings and had worn wires, and they'd been watched, and they got convictions. So it happens, it does. He was protected by the FBI as several agents were getting a cut of the profits. Dylan was involved as the local contact in the house, as Quinn Kelly lived primarily in Boise. Koberger was a frequent buyer from the house and a distributor to the Washington State University campus. Now, I've not heard, and someone might be able to correct me down below, I've not heard one person say that Brian Koberger was a drug distributor in that area. It hasn't been said. Whether it's being hidden, whether it's being covered up, that's another matter. But it hasn't been said. But saying that, it would explain why he went to this area at these hours. And I'll come back to that later on. But that's what they're saying in this. What do we got? Next. This is why he was frequently in the area around the house, even at odd hours. Everyone in the house knew what was going on, but went along with it as they received free drugs from Dylan for remaining silent. And again, I'd just like to point out, this isn't me saying this. This is someone else who is saying this. They're saying everything fell apart 2 weeks before the murder when Dylan and Maddie had a huge fight. See TikTok video Maddie posted about Dylan from 2 weeks prior. There is a video. It was on TikTok. It was about a massive argument that they'd had. This has been embellished and speculated upon, but there seemingly was an issue in... everything wasn't good. It wasn't. And everyone wanted to point out that these were all friends and they are all in this house and they all live together. And there's obviously videos that show them having fun together, but something did happen. There was a fight. There was an argument. Maddie threatened to turn Dylan and Quinn Kelly into the police for drug distribution. Maddie began talking to her friends about this and even told Adam at the corner club about it, which caused Kaylee to freak out. And then it says, see sidewalk video where Showalter tells Kaylee those guys are going to get you on the way to the grub truck when Kaylee found Maddie told Adam everything. And I don't know if you've all seen that. The majority of you will. There was an audio recording, and that audio recording clearly had that conversation where they were talking about something being said and that someone had indeed been told everything. And the response was, they're going to get you for this. That seems to be what that audio was implying, that there was a conversation that could have given this theory, it's just a theory, credibility. But we don't know what that was about. There's been nothing that has confirmed what that was specifically about. Jack Showalter was so scared about what was going to happen that he immediately fled the area and hasn't returned. Coincidentally, Dylan and Quinn Kelly had conspired to murder the roommates that night. Beth was spared as she was very loyal to and best friends with Dylan. Now, we haven't heard anything from Bethany Funk. We've heard nothing whatsoever. Nothing. And again, the fact that she has remained so silent offers credibility. It offers credibility to put yourself completely out of the equation and say, I didn't see nothing, I didn't hear nothing, I was asleep or whatever. You're removing yourself from that. You're removing yourself from having to be questioned because you just simply say, I don't know anything. I was asleep, I didn't hear, see, whatever. And if Dylan, the only other person who was in there, can back that up and say, well, I didn't see her, she was asleep, it offers it, again, credibility. I'm not saying this is what happened. I'm just talking about whether this has anything credible to it. What do we got next? The next one is... the plan involved Quinn Kelly remaining in Boise and making a TikTok video in Boise for an alibi, placing him 5 hours away from the scene. Dylan was to have complete control over the murder scene. Dylan and Quinn Kelly hired Brian Kohberger to do the killing, with Quinn Kelly promising his payout in drugs and money. The next morning, after Quinn Kelly verified the scene, Kohberger was a known hardcore drug abuser. Again, we've not heard anything stated about that. Obviously, we know his history, his past was regarding this. But again, is there any credibility to it? And you have to then say, well, if he was having issues in his job role and they were bringing him up on his job role and saying that he needed to improve, and he wasn't listening, he was despondent, again, that is given credibility to say that he was still using narcotics. And if he was still using narcotics, where was he getting them from? He was new to the area. He wouldn't have really known anybody. And we have these connections with the house over in Idaho. So again, it gives this story, this theory, credibility. But again, I'm not saying this is what happened. I'm just seeing whether there's any credence to it. Kohberger, being a criminal law expert, was sure he could get away with it. So now we're just speculating upon what Kohberger thought. You know, that there is no credence to that, because at this stage you are putting yourself in his position and you're saying that he did it because he thought he could get away with it. That is no more than utter speculation. He was even promised by Quinn Kelly that Kelly had the FBI working with him and that Kohberger would be protected. Still, Kohberger took no chances in this case, in case anything went wrong. The roommates, despite all being awake, were slow to respond, as Kohberger was a regular at the home, even at late hours. Dylan didn't call 911 as she was part of it and wanted the roommates dead. The roommates had evidence to put her behind bars, and Maddie now hated Dylan. Any necessary adjustment of the crime scene was done by Dylan before calling 911. Further, Dylan was the sole eyewitness. Kohberger returned to the scene at 9 a.m. as tracked by his phone data to get paid by Quinn Kelly, who had now was arriving from Boise. Note, Moscow is a 5-hour drive from Boise, so Quinn Kelly would have he'd have had to have left Boise very early in the morning. Upon inspecting the scene, Quinn Kelly paid Kohberger. Again, this part of it, we don't know. This is just what they're saying. There's nothing that has been stated that puts Quinn Kelly and Kohberger together. Quinn Kelly then called 911 so he could further promote his alibi and talk to the cops about the case, which he did when they arrived. Meanwhile, Kohberger took to social media in an attempt to create as much plausible deniability for himself as possible. And what we're now talking about is probably the Papa Rogers account and things like that. Now, I have to question if that's what they're talking about, because I still do feel that the Papa Rogers account was actually set up and controlled by Justin. But then I think to myself, there was things that the Papa Roger account had stated, like the knife sheath, that at the time, I don't believe it was public. So how would he have known? But there's a fucking coincidence there, I'm telling you. And for those of you who know what Justin's real name is, his full name, you'll understand what I mean by his connection to the Papa Rogers case. And then you think to yourself, does Justin truly know more than what he said? Do you know what I mean? It's almost like this then brings Justin's stories back in as having some degree of credence, and I can't do that. I can't give that guy any credence whatsoever. Let's have a look. What do we got next? We've got FBI agents did the opposite, posting on social media to incriminate Kohberger or using fake social media accounts that knew details of the crime. What Koberger didn't know is that Quinn Kelly and by extension Dylan were working with the FBI as they had a joint drug trafficking enterprise. And again, we're now talking about something completely different, aren't we? We're now saying that the FBI and these students are working together, and that's when this kind of loses me entirely at that stage. Because again, when I did that video before, it shows that when there are these things happening, there are the drug trafficking, etc., law enforcement have wanted to tackle that. But could they have wanted to get, like, I don't know. I don't see the... now, when it comes to FBI and dealing with narcotics, I don't see the FBI agents being involved with college students and trafficking. I don't see that. If someone was to say that the FBI were dealing with some cartel, and they were dealing with the bosses of the cartel, that wouldn't surprise me. You know, countries and governments have been propped up on narcotic trafficking. It has. Do you know what I mean? But to say that the FBI had a trafficking enterprise with college students, I think that's a stretch. It would only be Koberger that would be prosecuted. The only thing tying Koberger to the scene was a knife sheath planted by the FBI, which just so happened to have Koberger's DNA on it. Again, I find it unusual that the knife sheath was left behind and that it only had his on it, but we don't know if it only had his on it. But it had his on it. And if everything else that we know about is true, then the fact that he left the knife sheath there could be very real. The fact that he went back there as well the following day, we see it all the time. We see people who have committed crimes return to the scene of the crime because it's almost like a narcissism trait. And I think that is going to go hand in hand for the prosecution to push the fact that he did do it, because it is so frequent that when someone commits these atrocities that they want to be front and center and see what they have done. The 911 call, which likely raised questions about Quinn Kelly, has not been released. I do find that unusual that the 911 call has not been released. It's obviously included in the gag order, and you think what could be, but again, we've seen this in many situations. But what I will say is we see it in cases that there is a possibility that the people involved in that call could later be prosecuted for something. Now, we've never ever heard the 911 call in the Summer Wells case, and there is a potential that we haven't heard it because law enforcement in the background believes that Don or Candace Bly had something to do with Summer's disappearance, and that's why we don't hear it. Or there is something, some error, some statement made that is questionable. And, if this is just a 911 call, a straightforward 911 call, then I think we would have heard it. There is some real heinous crimes, some horrendous crimes. And if you're like me and you listen to the likes of Let's Read or Be Buster, any of these big channels, Lazy Masquerade, who do these stories, they're very often playing 911 calls to horrendous crimes, and got the victims in the call themselves. They are made public frequently. The only time we don't tend to hear them is when there's a likelihood that they're going to be used to prosecute someone involved in that call. Let me know what you think about that down below. And that brings that to a close. Do I believe it? I believe that there is a possibility that that drugs could have been a catalyst for this situation. Maybe Brian did go there to rob the place and was confronted. I don't know. Maybe he was in the grips of a narcotics issue. He had succumbed to it again. We know that he was having issues. It would appear he was having issues. He's about to lose his job, so on and so forth. And maybe he just knew that these kids at this house were distributors. It's possible. It is possible. But it is, at the end of the day, just someone else speculating based on the information that's out there. And some of that information has obviously come from the likes of 4chan, come from the likes of Reddit, and they themselves are speculating. The people who give the information about the likes of Quinn Kelly, you don't know who they are. They are a name behind a tag, and we just don't know. We don't know who any of these people are. And we've seen, especially recently, with the likes of Justin coming forward, and look at what he put forward. Some of it could literally be complete and utter lunacy spoken by a madman. And some of the stuff that has been said is the kind of stuff that I would expect to see upon a wall in an asylum written in shit. And on that note, I will catch you all in the next one.